Welcome to Birds Play Sports, where we weekly cover Ravens and Orioles news. We're your hosts, TJ and Jared. In this video, we're going to be doing a Week 2 game recap of our blowout victory, the Cleveland Browns, in which we won 41 to 17. A nice comeback win, very much needed win and just a feel good win. The Browns players were talking a lot of crap. Harbs was definitely on the hot seat going, into this week. And I still believe he is after this week as well. The fire is still on, but just all around great win. And a team performance, and just to get right on rolling into the vid. I'll start with the defense. I feel like this is the vintage Ravens defense that we expect. It kind of remind me of watching a Mike McDonald defense back in 2023, where we were fast, we were physical, guys were flying all around the field, guys were locked in, and in their assignments. And one player in particular who was definitely an MVP of the game was Roquan Smith. And it just seemed like Roquan, this was probably his best game since 2023 with the Ravens. He didn't look slow anymore. He didn't look like he lost a step. He didn't look gassed. He didn't look fat. He looked in shape. He looked fast. He looked physical, sideline to sideline. He was hitting everything, tackling everything. He looked amazing, and he looked like Bears Roquan. And it was very nice to see that from him. It was very nice to see that, not necessarily see, but it was just nice to know we can still get that out of him. And we're going to need that moving forward, into the season when we face teams like the Chiefs. We're going to face the Bengals again with all their weapons. We got the Lions coming up soon. We have a lot of teams that have a lot of dangerous guys that we're going to need to defend. And, seeing him, back to, his usual form, it was a nice thing to see, and also it was nice to see us getting pressure on the Browns offensive line. And, me and you sort of talked about this in our pregame for the Browns. Once you get Flacco pressured, he's done. You got him. It's like a deer in the headlight. You not 99%. It's a 99% chance you're going to stop him on that drive, and that's exactly what we did on each drive. The defense keep getting, was getting a lot of stops, allowing our offense to get on the field, allowing you know our guys to create a rhythm more so later on in the game. But I just loved what I saw from the defense, man. I loved what I saw. Nate Wiggins had a nice interception, which he should have ran back for a touchdown, but he let guys like Joe Flacco and offensive linemen catch up to him. So he's going to need to be a little bit more faster next time to get that that pick six. And just guys as usual like Kyle Hamilton, Teddy Buchanan had a pretty nice game. It seems like he's going to be the Robin to Roquan Smith's Batman. So this overall great performance by the defense. And I just want to ask you, what did you feel about the defense?
I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head with everything. It was just nice to see Roquan out there flying, man. I mean, he looked like
Yeah.
like pre-buffet Roquan, like he looked great out there. He was looked like he was calling out the plays. He was as soon as like the freaking running back got the ball, he was like busting through the line. And Buchanan was right there behind him. It seemed like a lot of the plays as well. So I think that's another thing that we need to talk about with Roquan is as much as a good player he's gonna need a good running mate next to him. It's two linebackers in the field. So it's not just him. So kind of talking about I was watching the live stream. I believe it was Coach Evans's live stream when he was talking about how how it felt like Roquan was almost babying Trent Simpson over the last year and parts of this year as well, and kind of having to direct him places because he didn't seem to know where he was going, and that didn't allow a lot of time for Roquan to read the play offensively. And it kind of reminds me of how, like, with Lamar, under Roman, he didn't get a chance to read the defense because he was always up with the freaking line with like 5 seconds to go on the play clock, so it's kind of reminds me of, so to be able to have a nice running mate along with Roquan, and then him look fast and physical and ready, to go ahead and hit, just felt amazing. And then that return, he
Yeah.
looked like Derrick Henry on that return. He looked fast. You know,
Yeah, he was fast.
they say he was going like 19, 20, 19 something miles an hour or whatever. I'm like, okay, I didn't know he could go that fast. I didn't know he was a running back in high school.
19 miles an hour?
Yeah, it was something like that. If you want to look it up for me while I'm talking, I can maybe. You can fact check me there. I swear it was 19 something. But congratulations to Roquan as well for earning AFC Defensive Player of the Week as well. It's I think our first defensive or first player of the week this year. But I think to transition to the offense, I don't you didn't really touch on the offense that much, but the offense looked, very it was very strange because there was points in the game where I texted you during the game and I thought like there was a good chance we might lose this game. And the offense was really stale. They had the only times they were scoring was when they were given good, field position. But in the second half, they really seemed to turn it up. Like they were seeing like they abandoned the run. They started hitting them play actions. Getting Lamar to roll out. And that was interesting to me. Because the Ravens don't really seem to be a big play action team for some reason. And they really should be. Considering the running game that they have. And the fact that they were able to dice them up and Lamar was able to fit in some tight windows, to guys like Zay and Walker and Hopkins twice. Those two Hopkins catches were amazing. I haven't seen a Ravens receiver do that since Bolden. So like, and that was in 2012. We're talking about 13 years ago now. None of our receivers on this team outside of Hopkins can probably do that. Every catch from Hopkins so far, I think, has been in like a great catch. Like there hasn't been like a
Yeah,
slouch in any of his catches, so that is incredible. Is either drawing pass interferences or is catching an amazing ball. And if I had to be honest, I think that's the receiver we probably should have gotten in 2023. But that's besides the point. That's besides the point. But offensive line again, just not good. To be honest, and I was telling, TJ this earlier, you live and die by the trenches, and if we could be explosive, we have Zay, we have DeAndre, we have, Henry, we got Lamar, we got all these guys, but don't be surprised when, when the trenches kill you. Like when the trenches just finally, give in. We've seen teams fall apart because their trenches are just terrible. I mean, look at what
mhm,
the trench battle last year between the Eagles and Chiefs. They dominated them in the Super Bowl all 60 minutes.
yep,
And it was work in the trenches all game. The guys were getting pressure. Mahomes was getting flustered. And he was throwing it into double coverage. He was throwing picks. Like even like the Bengals game, the Bengals Super Bowl. Ultimately the offensive line is what got Joe Burrow sacked. The offensive line let him down the AFC Championship game. The offensive line got him hurt again. So it's just Lamar isn't Joe Burrow where he's stationary in the pocket, more. I mean, Joe Burrow can move in the pocket, but Joe Burrow is now out until December because of his terrible offensive line. So we're blessed enough to have Lamar Jackson back there to make a lot of plays, but our offensive line really has to step it up. Our guys need to be benched. We need more
yep,
looks out there for guys. If I can accept a Rosengarten, sophomore slump because it's his second year, but I mean, Falele doesn't look like he's progressing very much. Voorhees was getting turned around a few times, and Linderbaum had some bad reps as well. So it's just I know Ronnie Stanley had that one bad rep in the red zone, that got Lamar sacked. So it's gonna be our job to keep Lamar upright. We know what Lamar can do with a clean pocket. I mean, Lamar won an MVP with a clean pocket all in 2019, throwing to freaking door dashers. Like so not to say that we don't need weapons for Lamar. We need both. But it just feels like they invest in one or the other, and it really needs to be both. And the trenches need to be worked on throughout this whole season. And if there's no progress with Falele's game or Voorhees' game or whatever, the guys need to be benched, because we can't have a lot of games where Derrick Henry's going 10 for 23 or whatever he was on Sunday. We can't have a lot of games like that because you start to become one dimensional, and then that could be a major problem in the playoffs. And we don't need that. We just don't need that. We cannot have the offensive line be our demise this season for a great team that we have around Lamar, the defense, and all that stuff. And that goes with the defensive line as well. I wanted to see a little bit more pressure this on Sunday. They got a lot, but I wanted to see a little bit more considering their offensive line was beat up. So um, they couldn't generate shit in the Bills game. That's all they were generating. They're pooping on the field. With how freaking terrible their reps were. So the Lions offensive line now they're weaker than they were last year. I know their guard play isn't very great, so it's if Mads can't go, that's really going to be unfortunate because we need that interior pressure this Sunday versus Jared Goff because that Jared Goff's another one that get him pressure, he could become a deer in the headlights as well. So um that's kind of all I gotta say about the Ravens defense and offense.
Oh yeah, just to get on my take on the offense, what again, going back off, offensive line play as well as the run play, it was really concerning, to see Derrick Henry get shut down like that. We would have liked to give him more opportunities, especially to rip off a couple big runs. I think he had about one or two runs that went for like nine, anywhere from 5 to 9 yards. But we want to
Mhm.
see more of that, of course. And it seems like, the right side of the line in particular, when the Ravens try to run in that direction, that's where the most trouble happens.
Yeah.
And it can happen at the left side too. Don't get me wrong. Miles Garrett beat Ronnie Stanley on a couple of plays in that game. But overall, we do need to see more consistent play for the O line. And, I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens, should seek a trade, later on in the season. I know how high Harbs is on Faalele, and, I know he sees a lot good in him, which a lot of us fans don't see. But, if it's, the offensive line play is shaky like that moving forward, we're going against some bullies, on the defensive line. Like we
Yeah.
have Aiden Hutchinson this upcoming Monday.
Yep.
We need to account for
We gotta
that,
play like Mike.
because
We gotta play the Packers defense later in the year.
yeah, but Micah Parsons, yep. So, we need to account for that and we need to be prepared. And, it's a good thing that we were able to win this game, in the air. That's a credit to Lamar, again, disproving that narrative. Oh, we're going to make Lamar beat us with his arm. He can beat you with his arm. But, we're a running team and we need to get that running game going, and that'll open up so much more for us. So hopefully against the Lions, we can get that back on track
Mhm.
and continue that on for the season, because I want to see Derrick Henry have 2K yards.
Yeah.
I want him to be like how
Oh, you
Saquon Barkley was last year. He should have been that last year, but he had a couple of games where he just, we didn't get him those blocks and he couldn't get that 100. But this year he has to make up for it, and I think he will. So overall, moving on to the receiver side, then we can get to the stats after this. I did like Tez Walker. Every time he catches the ball, it's a big play. Tez Walker balled out.
Yeah.
D Hop, as we said, he balled out. He had nice, strong catches. We weren't used to seeing that with Nelson Aguilar. So,
No.
upgrading from Nelson Aguilar to D Hop is night and day.
Yeah.
And, obviously, Zay, and Bate, man, I want to see more from Bate, because people really forget how clutch that man was in the Browns game last year when
Yep.
Zay got out, in the
Yep.
Steelers game, and in
Yep.
that Bills game. And I want to see him get rewarded with, a lot more, catches. So, this is the first time I can say in a while, our wide receiving core is deep. Like five, we have five solid dudes who can do anything for us, you know. And that's not even, we forget Tyler Wallace. He had a nice catch too. So,
Yeah. He's a do everything
the
guy.
offense,
Yeah,
yeah,
Wallace, he
he's
can
do
block,
everything.
he can
Yep.
catch, he can do a whole bunch of things, man. He's a utility weapon for us, man.
Yeah, he can do it all. And, I'm so happy to have all those guys on our team. So, you know, that's all I gotta say for the offense. We beat them with our arm, we disproved those narrative once again. We can get to those stats now.
Before we do get the stats, I do want to ask you, what do you think about Mark Andrews?
Mark Andrews, I don't really know. He seems still shaky. I saw a lot of people think that was a touchdown that he caught. They said he got, 2 feet down before the ball got knocked out, but still, don't get the ball knocked out of your arms. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? And it just seemed like his hands is shaky. It seems, I wouldn't be surprised if, he's still in his head, from the division round game last year and just the overall, talk around him. And I don't know if it's a matter of the Ravens kind of needing to break him in a little bit more, or maybe it just has to naturally come back to him. But he's too much of an important piece on the offense for him to not believe in his abilities no more. And I guess it's a good thing that we're going to be getting Likely back soon, who's going to be his successor, and I know he'll get a lot of attention, so maybe that'll free up some space for Mark Andrews to, feed him a little bit. But overall, he does seem shaky, and I'm kind of concerned, just touching on him a little bit. I saw some, fans saying that we should trade him, for another piece. And, you know, this is the first time in a while where I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't do it, but I wouldn't mind it. So,
I wouldn't like it
I
just for the
mean,
fact that, we don't know how likely he's going to be when he comes back. So I think we got to keep Andrews throughout the season and probably just let him walk.
that's what they're going to end up doing it too. Yep.
So I won't be surprised with that. I'm not going to trade Lamar's favorite target midseason either.
Yeah.
But honestly, with your point with Bateman though, just kind of switch real quick. I think Bateman he didn't start getting it going till like week 4 or 5 last year. He had that Bengals game where he had the touchdown, he had a good catch, and then he had the Bucks game. He didn't get it going until like late mid-season last year. So I'm not worried about Bateman. I'm not saying that you were worried about Bateman, but like I want to see Bateman too. But I think as the year progresses, he's gonna get his. He's gonna get his.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, for
ready,
sure.
ready for some stats.
Let's go. Let's read them all.
All right, bet. All right, you got the offense.
All right. So, Zoom had a message in our way. All right. So, Lamar Jackson, 19 of 29, 225 yards for 4 touchdowns. And mind you, this was an off game for him. So,
Yeah,
you know, imagine what his on game is going to be like. Hopefully, we get that against the Lions.
man, almost the Jackson
Just a
Five, man.
very efficient day. Oh yeah, yep. I want that too. Still for it being an off day, still a very efficient day for Lamar. Only 10 incompletions. He did miss a couple of out routes, to the side, to sidelines to Zay, but he's going to hit those later on in the season. They're going to get their chemistry way up, and it's going to be just like that. So I'm not worried about that at all. Moving on to the rushing, and like we mentioned earlier, a rough game for Derrick Henry. 11 carries for 23 yards, 2.1 average. I think that's just a testament to the Browns' run defense. They shut down Chase Brown, the same way in week 1. And not to compare Chase Brown to Derrick Henry, but, they really are, making it known that they're going to have a pretty stout run defense. So hopefully that's something that we can look out for in our second matchup against them, can be a lot better at. Lamar Jackson also had, 2 carries for 13 yards. Justice Hill had 3 carries for 7 yards. And Zay Flowers, probably on a jet sweep, had, 1 carry for 4 yards. I don't know why we keep doing those. Those don't work. But, it is what it is. Moving on to the receiving, Zay Flowers, another great game by him. He has 7 receptions for 75 yards. I think he's got to be like top 5 receiving in the league after, these 2 weeks. So,
We can
keeping
check
up.
out.
Hopefully Zay can keep it up.
We can check
What was
after.
that?
We can check after.
Oh, check out. D Hop had 2 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. Looks beautiful. Devontae Walker had 2 receptions for 26 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tylan Wallace had 2 receptions for 25 yards and 1 touchdown. Justice Hill had 3 receptions for 18 yards. Rashad Bateman had 2 receptions for 15 yards. And Mark Andrews had 1 reception for 2 yards.
Yeah, not a good day for the tight ends, huh? Zaire Mitchell Payton had a target. He
Yeah,
dropped a touchdown. So
yeah. He was on his Lee Evans stuff.
hopefully not. But obviously we had the fumble. Derrick Henry had another fumble that last week. Luckily we didn't lose it. And I think Tavius Robinson forced the fumble on Joe Flacco. Flacco. I can't tell. I can't say Flacco. And Roquan returned it all the way. Speaking of tackles, Roquan led the team in tackles with 15. He had 3 tackles for loss and 2 QB hits, and he had a touchdown. When's the last time he had a defensive touchdown? I guess the Marlon Humphrey pick six.
Yeah.
Malachi Starks had 7 tackles. 4 of them were solo. Tavius Robinson had 6 tackles. He had a sack, a tackle for loss, and a QB hit. Teddy Buchanan had 6 tackles as well. Keon Martin got some reps out there. He had 5 total tackles. Chidobe Awuzie had 5 total tackles as well. He also had a tackle on Marlon Humphrey. On Nate Wiggins, who got him hurt. So shout out to Chidobe Awuzie. Kyle Hamilton had 5 total tackles. He had a tackle for loss. He blew up that screen. I don't know if you remember that play, but he blew up that screen. Trenton Simpson had 4 total tackles. Marlon had 3 total tackles. He had a pass deflection, and which was a drop pick into the end zone for the player, whatever it was, a player's arms touchdown. That was bullshit. Nate Wiggins had 3 total tackles, a tackle for loss, 3 pass deflections, and an interception. Should have been a pick six. TJ Tampa had two total tackles. He had a nice pass deflection on the fourth down. Mike Green was close to his first sack. He was this close, like very, very close to his first sack. But Nandi
He's gonna get
Madubuike,
it.
yeah, I think so too. Nandi Madubuike had a tackle, a sack, a tackle for loss, and two QB hits, and that's pretty much it. We're not gonna go over everybody. Like I said, Wiggins had an interception. We also had the block punt. Let's not forget about that. Kind of want to talk about that afterwards. But the Browns had
It's
seven.
Sanusi Kane.
Yep, he had the return. Um, the Browns had 17 first downs to our 14. We each had 10 passing first downs. They had seven rushing first downs to our two only. We had two from penalties to their none. They were 7 for 18 on third down. We were 3 for 12, which we need to get better at. They were 1 for 3 on fourth down. We were 1 for 1. They ran 72 total plays to our 53. They had 323 total yards to our 242. We both had 12 drives. They averaged 4.5 yards per play. We averaged 4.6. We went over all those passing yards. They had 115 yards on the ground to our 45. They had six penalties for 42 yards. We had six penalties for 28 yards. We really got to clean that up. They had two turnovers. We had none. They held the ball for 31 minutes and 49 seconds. We held it for 28 minutes and 11 seconds. I think this game was really the perfect blend of an entire team coming together and winning it. Instead of one side winning it for the other. Because if we had won that Bills game, the Ravens offense would have won that for the Ravens defense. And to me, like that happens a lot with us. You know, one side really carries the weight. But the special teams, the defense, the offense, flowed really well on Sunday. I mean, the offense did definitely get picked up by the defense and the special teams, but that block punt and that punt return to set us up in great field position is just huge. Like we need more of that. We need more of that. We got to start cutting our field position more and more because even in this game we started a lot of these drives at like the 10 or less. Like we can't keep having that, like because you're putting your terrible offensive line in a bad predicament, we just can't have that, so um yeah, just not a good and not a great showing. I mean it's a great showing of teamwork really. They really came together as a team and won it as a team and defense picked up the offense and special teams put them in great field positions, like I said, and we need more of that throughout the season.
Oh yeah, for sure. And hopefully we can get a marriage of both a good marriage of both sides, moving forward. Because like I said, we have a hard schedule.
Yeah,
And I think that this Lions game coming up is going to be a great test of that. If we can keep that up, both sides playing for each other, and both sides sort of having that unity to make plays. Like, let's not keep the defense on the field long so our offense, can, also get their groove going as well. You get what I'm
right.
saying? So,
Yeah,
hopefully, we can just continue to do that and not just against the Browns. Like, let's show it that, we can do it against, these high powered teams as well, which I know we can.
yeah, absolutely. So before we close out this video, we're gonna go over our record predictions for the or like our predictions that we had in the games of all the NFL games of the week. So we're gonna start off with TJ since you went first. I should have counted it up for
Go.
the video. But you predicted the Jets to beat the Bills, and that wasn't right, so you're 0-1. You predicted the Patriots to beat the Dolphins, which they did, 1-1. You predicted the Jaguars to beat the Bengals, which did not happen, so you're 1-2. You did predict the Ravens win, so you're 2-2. You predicted the Broncos to beat the Colts, which they probably should have, but they didn't. So what is that? You're 2-3. You're 3-3 now with the Chargers beating the Raiders. You're 4-3 with the Rams beating the Titans. You're 5-3 with the Seahawks beating the Patriots. I mean, the Steelers. I'm sorry. You're 6-3 with the Eagles beating the Chiefs. You're 7-3 with the Buccaneers beating the Texans. Look, you're on a roll now. You slumped it first, but you're on a roll now. Thursday night game don't count. I might just give that to us just to be nice. So I'll say 8-3. You're 8-3. You predicted the Cowboys to beat the Giants. You're 9-3. You predicted the 49ers to beat the Saints. You're 10-3. 10-3, right?
Yes.
You predicted the Lions to beat the Bears. You're 11-3. You predicted the Cardinals to beat the Panthers. You're 12-3. You predicted the Vikings to beat the Falcons, so you're 12-4. So you finished 12-4 this week. So clap it up. You did great. You did great this week. Let's see how I did.
That's why I'm starting to bet now. That's why I'm starting to bet. I'm an NFL head. I'm an NFL head, man.
So 12-4 your first week. Let's see how I did. I probably did worse. I feel like I didn't do good. But I went 1-0 with the Bills beating the Jets. I went 2-0 with the Patriots beating the Dolphins. I went 3-0 with the Bengals beating the Jaguars. I went 4-0 with the Ravens beating the Browns. I went 4-1 because the Colts beat the Broncos. 5-1 with the Chargers beating the Raiders. 5-2 with the. I don't know why I said the Titans would beat the Rams. Now I'm really in a slump now. Oh my God. So what was I? 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, 4-1, 5-1, 5-2, 5-3 with the. I predicted the Steelers to beat the Seahawks. 5-4. I predicted the Chiefs to beat the Eagles. I'm really in a slump. 5-5. I predicted the Texans to beat the Buccaneers. Something told me not to go with the Texans. I'm gonna give myself the win, like how I gave you the win for the Giants, for the, not the Giants, but the Packers game. So 6-5,
Bills.
seven
Oh,
and five. Oh no, that's next week. 7-5 with Dallas beating the Giants. 8-5 with the 49ers beating the Saints. 9-5 with the Lions beating the Bears. 9-6 and I went 9-7. So that's not good. Not I went 9-7. I didn't do good this week. So I had to do better this week. We're already want to know because we didn't do I meant to send you the predictions so we could do them or have them ready for the next for our Lions video, but we'll just do it after the video's over.
yeah, those predict. I like those. I like this new segment we have. The predictions are definitely fun. Aside from Ravens fans, me and Jared are just NFL fans as well. We love to root for teams. When the Ravens aren't playing, and just sort of analyze what they're doing. So, this is a great segment to have, and we gotta get them numbers up, man. You're an NFL head too. You got that knowledge too. So you gotta.
Are you shit
The
talking,
victory
bro?
gotta
Shut
come
up.
with
You're shit talking
it.
for this because you went 12-4. I bet you go 8-8 this week.
You 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 clocked out. You clocked out there, so and then you activated again. So okay, but got any more you want to add? Close the
Nah,
video
just
out.
I'm ready to get to this Lions game and we'll talk about the pregame for that.
Yep. Likewise, man. I'm ready for that game too. So great win by the Ravens. Improved to 1-1. Ready to go 2-1 against the Lions. Monday Night Football. It's going to be fun. We'll
Yep.
talk about it in the next video. But that's what we got for you guys today. Bird Spray Sports. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Comment down below what was your favorite moments of the game. Also comment down below, what was your favorite play? Oh, that's kind of the same thing. What was impact play that you think, really, turned the tides of the game? And also make sure to check out our social medias, our Instagram, our TikTok, our Twitter. Also, make sure to check out our second channel, Casual Cinema. We might see him. You sent me a text message about the movie, so we'll talk about it. But we'll talk about it off camera. But stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to that channel, Casual Cinema. We'll have something on there soon. But we're Birds Play Sports, and we're out.
Well.